Joining us right now to discuss the importance of this day is Doug Dokis. He is a director of a national Indigenous youth program and Anishinaabe from Dokis First Nation. Doug, thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, my pleasure.
Let me start off by asking you, what was your reaction to the Prime Minister's statement on Indigenous Peoples Day today?
It's always nice to hear the recognition from the federal government, the Prime Minister. For me, it's every day, Indigenous National Indigenous Day. So many of us look to this day as a way of really celebrating that. And when we have a voice from the Prime Minister's office, certainly that adds to what we're already doing and talking about in our communities.
And for you, what does it mean to address systemic racism in this country?
It's interesting that, I think we're talking about systemic racism right now at an international level. In Canada, for Indigenous people, this has been a long-standing conversation and actions.
We were just looking at some video of how Indigenous Peoples Day is traditionally marked. Talk a little bit about looking at this day and acknowledging this day in the context of COVID.
I guess in the conversations that I've had with some of the communities, people around the country, typically, this day, but this season in general, this cycle in general, is a time when Indigenous communities come together to celebrate, the summer solstice, spring. And so on this day, I think that with the pandemic currently in place, it has hindered those celebrations, but it's certainly created opportunity where communities are having the time to spend with their young people and actually take them back out on the land and reintroduce them to some of the family and community that typically is found within First Nations communities.
Finally, Doug, how can Canadians do their part to respond to calls to action? It often feels like the burden rests squarely on the shoulders of government, but we all have a role to play.
Certainly, and calls to action, I've been around long enough to have seen many of them, and I think we've reached a point in history where Canada in particular needs to acknowledge its history and how we got here in the first place. So non-Indigenous people, and in our case Canadians, need to stand up and recognize that these injustices that have occurred for Indigenous people throughout Canada's whole history could happen to anybody. And so understanding that history and understanding that Indigenous people are not looking for, let's say, a reckoning, but more of a, let's look at this from the perspective of humanity as opposed to an us and them. And in order for that to happen, calls to action are exactly that. They're calls to action for a specific topic area that dies off. We need a call to humanity action with regards to this. And if Indigenous people role in society is acknowledged and the history is acknowledged, then people will find that there's a lot in common, and it is that goal for balance and a human experience, a shared human experience.
Doug, thank you for being with us, and happy Indigenous Peoples Day to you.
Thank you very much.